Rain came down in silver sheets across the highway, and Marcus Bishop dreaded every mile that carried him toward the evening ahead. He had no idea that the stranded woman and the 4 frightened little girls he was about to rescue on this washed-out stretch of road were the exact blind date he had spent all day trying to avoid, or that the truth would come tumbling out of a child's mouth in a room full of strangers before he ever got the chance to hide it. He only knew he was late. He was soaked, and he was driving toward the worst dinner of his life. Marcus gripped the wheel of his battered 2004 Chevy Silverado, his knuckles ashy pale against the cracked leather as the storm drummed the roof like it had a grudge. At 35, he was a master mechanic, just barely keeping the lights on at Bishop & Son Restorations, the shop his father had built brick by brick on the hard side of town. He was a single father, too, to 7-year-old Isaiah, a boy with a gap-toothed grin and a head full of questions, the one bright thing in a life that had gotten heavy and stayed heavy. Tonight he'd traded his grease-stained coveralls for a charcoal suit he hadn't worn since the funeral. His wife had passed 2 years back, a fast, cruel illness that emptied their savings and left him with a stack of medical bills that still followed him around like a shadow. He'd kept the shop and he'd kept his boy, but the bank was circling now, close enough that he could feel it. And on top of all that, his well-meaning, impossible-to-refuse sister Renee had badgered him into a blind date. "You cannot spend the rest of your life married to distributor caps and unpaid invoices, Marcus," she'd scolded him over the phone 2 hours earlier. "Her name is Naomi. She's in business, she's sharp, she's classy, and word is, she's had it just as hard as you have, in her own way. She needs a good man who isn't chasing anything. Just show up at Beaumont by 7. For me. Please." Beaumont. The name alone turned his stomach. It was one of those hushed, gold-lit French places downtown where a single appetizer cost more than a week of groceries for him and Isaiah. He had $60 in his wallet, and a credit card he was afraid to swipe. He could already picture the whole thing. The moment this Naomi would ask what he did for a living, and he'd watch her eyes go polite and distant, the way they always did. 10 miles away, on a winding, tree-lined road that hugged the wealthy edge of the lake, Naomi Sinclair was living her own private disaster, and she was not living it alone. At 33, Naomi was the CEO of Sinclair Holdings, a real estate and technology firm her late husband Daniel had built from a single office into something that owned a good piece of the city skyline. When Daniel died, the whole thing had landed on her shoulders overnight, and she'd carried it with a straight back and a locked jaw ever since, because that was what you did. She was efficient, she was respected, and underneath it all, she was so tired and so alone that some nights she sat in the car in the garage for 20 minutes just to be somewhere. No one needed anything from her. Her friend and right hand, Jessica, had ambushed her with this blind date. "You need something real, Naomi," Jessica had said, sliding an embossed reservation card across the desk. "He's a working man, a single dad, no agenda, no angle. No boardroom knife hiding behind his back, just a decent human being. Consider it doctor's orders, before you burn all the way down." Naomi had almost said no. She almost always said no. But tonight, the plan had fallen apart in the most Naomi way possible. Her mother, who was supposed to watch the girls, had thrown her back out that afternoon and couldn't get off the couch, which was how Naomi ended up on a flooding back road at dusk with all 4 of her daughters buckled into a car that was never meant to haul anybody's carpool. Because the car was Daniel's car. It was a pristine British racing green 1969 Jaguar E-Type. The love of her late husband's life, the thing he'd tinkered with on Sunday mornings, the thing she hadn't been able to sell and hadn't been able to drive. Tonight, for the first time in 2 years, she'd slid behind that wooden wheel, told herself it was just a car, and pulled out of the garage with her whole heart in her throat. She'd planned to drop the girls at her mother's on the way and go to the date alone. It was, she would realize very soon, a spectacular mistake. In the back, 10-year-old Zuri sat with her arms crossed and her chin up, doing her best to look like the storm didn't scare her, because she was the oldest, and that was her job. Beside her, the 7-year-old twins, Amara and Aaliyah, argued in a low buzz about which of them had called the window seat. And in the car seat, buckled in tight and clutching a fistful of crayons, 4-year-old Nia hummed a little tune to herself, oblivious to everything. They were halfway around a sharp, canopied curve when the Jaguar gave a violent shudder. A deep, ugly knocking rose out of the engine bay, and then the power simply left. The beautiful old car coasted to a limp, defeated stop on the gravel shoulder, half swallowed by the dark and the rain, miles from anything. "Mommy?" Nia said, the humming stopping. "Why'd we stop?" "It's okay, baby." Naomi pumped the gas, turned the key. The engine coughed and died. "It's okay. Mommy's got it." She did not have it. She grabbed her phone and found one bar flickering in and out, then nothing at all, dead in a wooded dip where the signal went to die. She was stranded in a $3,000 dress with 4 children, a stalled classic car, and a storm that showed no sign of quitting. "Are we going to be stuck here forever?" one of the twins asked, voice going thin. "No," Naomi said, with more certainty than she felt. "No, we are not." Back on the main highway, traffic had locked up solid, behind a wreck near the interchange. Marcus checked the cracked clock on his dash, 6:14, sighed from the bottom of his chest, and took the next exit. He knew these back roads. He'd learned to drive on them as a teenager, learned to fix cars on the shoulders of them. Cutting through was risky in this weather, but it was his only shot at making Beaumont by 7. His headlights swept the curve, and the beams caught a flash of chrome. Marcus eased off the gas. There, tilted on the narrow shoulder with its long hood pointed at the trees, sat the unmistakable silhouette of an E-type Jaguar. A genuine masterpiece, stranded in the mud like a crime in progress. His mechanic's heart clenched, and then his headlights climbed a little higher, and he saw them. Small faces, pressed to the fogged rear glass, 4 of them, children. Before we go any further, this channel is brand new, and every single subscribe is what keeps stories like this one coming. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it honestly means more than you know. Go ahead and hit subscribe, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and let's get back to that car on the side of the road. Marcus didn't think twice. He pulled the Silverado onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the heavy tires, flipped on his hazards, and was out the door before the truck had fully stopped rocking. Inside the Jaguar, Naomi's heart slammed against her ribs as harsh amber light flooded her mirrors. Every protective instinct she owned flared to life at once. A woman alone, with 4 children, on a dark road, headlights behind her, a big figure climbing out of a truck. Her hand closed around her phone, even though it was dead, and she twisted around. "Girls," she said, calm and low, "sit tight and let Mommy talk." "Is that a bad guy?" Amara whispered. "We're going to find out." The man jogged toward them with his collar turned up against the rain, and even soaked to the bone in a suit that had clearly seen better decades, he didn't move like a threat. He moved like a man in a hurry to help. He tapped, gently, 2 knuckles on the driver's glass. "You all okay in there?" Naomi lowered the window 2 inches. Cold air and the smell of wet pine rushed into the warm cabin. "We're fine," she said, her voice pure boardroom ice. "My people are on the way." Marcus glanced past her, at the dead dash, the dark radio, the 4 kids crammed in the back, then back to her, water dripping off the end of his nose. "Ma'am, respectfully, unless your people drive a tow truck that can teleport, y'all are gonna be out here a while." Highways backed up for miles behind me. That's why I'm on this road in the first place. He wiped rain from his eyes. That's a '69 E-Type. Beautiful car. Also famous for dying in the rain. Pop the hood, and let me take a look. Unless you'd rather everybody sit out here and get cold. Naomi blinked. He'd named the exact year and model in the dark, in a downpour, at a glance. And there was something in the easy way he'd counted her daughters, not calculating, just noticing, that loosened the fist around her heart by a single finger. "Mommy, I'm cold," Nia said. That did it. Naomi reached down and pulled the latch. "Thank you," she said, stiff but sincere. Marcus walked to the front, lifted the long clamshell hood, and pulled a heavy waterproof flashlight from his coat. He worked with a quick, sure confidence, hands moving through the crowded old engine bay, like he'd been born reading it. In the back seat, 4 little faces turned to watch this soaked stranger, who'd appeared out of the storm to save them. He glanced up, caught them staring, and did the last thing Naomi expected. He smiled, a warm, easy, unhurried smile, and pointed his flashlight toward the oldest. "You in charge back there?" he asked. Zuri lifted her chin. "I'm the oldest. Then I'm gonna need your help. You mind holding this light steady for me, boss? Can't fix an engine I can't see. Roll down that window. Just a crack." He passed the flashlight through, into her careful hands. "There you go. Congratulations. You're the lead engineer now. Point it right where I'm pointing my finger." Zuri's tough girl scowl cracked into something that was almost, secretly, a grin. The twins pressed in on either side of her, suddenly desperate to be part of it. "What's that part?" Amara asked. "That's the distributor cap," Marcus said, loud enough to carry over the rain. "Fancy name, simple job. It's supposed to send the spark to the right place at the right time. Water got up inside it, and now it's confused, so your engine quit on you. Watch." He worked the cap loose, pulled a clean rag from his back pocket, and started drying the little contacts one by one. This is called finding the broken part. You don't throw the whole car away. You just find the one small thing that's hurting, and you take care of it. "That's what my daddy used to say," Nia announced from her car seat, matter of fact. "About the car." Marcus's hands went still for just a second. He looked up, past the girls, and found Naomi watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. By then she'd stepped out into the rain herself, unwilling to sit useless while a stranger did the work in a storm. She'd grabbed the big umbrella from the passenger seat and moved to hold it over him and the open engine, shielding them both from the worst of it. "You didn't have to come out here," Marcus said, glancing up. "It's freezing." "I don't sit and watch other people fix my problems," Naomi said, holding the umbrella steady, her damp hem forgotten. "What's the verdict?" "Verdict's what I told your engineer. Distributor cap, full of water. Common as anything on these old British engines." He reseated the dried cap and tightened it down. "I can get you running. Temporary. Enough to get you and those kids somewhere warm and dry, at least. You can really tell all that just from the sound and a look?" "Ma'am, I've been fixing cars since before I could drive one." A self-deprecating smile touched his mouth. "It's your lucky night, honestly. You broke down in front of the one guy on this road who'd rather help a stranded E-Type than win the lottery." Naomi almost laughed, and the sound surprised her. "Lucky is not the word I'd have picked for tonight." She hesitated, then added, quieter, so the girls couldn't quite hear over the rain. "This was my husband's car. He passed. I haven't been able to drive it. Tonight was the first time." Marcus's whole manner shifted. Nothing dramatic, just a softening, the way a person handles something they've realized is fragile. He looked down at the engine, then back at her. "Then I'll treat her like she still belongs to somebody who matters." he said. Because she does. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain on the umbrella. Naomi looked away first, her throat tight in a way she hadn't felt in 2 years. Try her now, Marcus said gently, breaking the spell. He shut the long hood with a solid, satisfying thunk. Naomi slid back behind the wooden wheel and turned the silver key. The inline six coughed, sputtered for one heart-stopping second, and then roared to life, settling into a deep, throaty, healthy idle. In the back seat, all 4 girls burst into cheering at once, and Nia banged her crayons against the seat like tiny drumsticks. "You fixed it!" Zuri shouted, delighted, all the tough girl armor gone. "You actually fixed it!" "Told you," Marcus said, grinning, rain streaming down his face. "Never bet against the lead engineer." Naomi stepped back out into the drizzle and pulled a crisp, monogrammed handkerchief from her coat, offering it to him. "For your hands." He looked at the fine fabric, then at his grease-black fingers. "I'll ruin it. Consider it a casualty of a good deed." She pressed it into his palm anyway, her clean fingers brushing his. "I'm Naomi. My friends call me Nomi." She caught herself the second it left her mouth. She never gave that name away, not to anyone, and here she'd handed it to a stranger in the rain. "Marcus." He accepted the handkerchief, fingers brushing hers again. "Drive slow through these curves, Nomi. Roads are slick, and you've got precious cargo." From the back, the smallest voice piped up. "Wait." Nia thrust a folded, damp piece of paper out the cracked window. A scribbled crayon drawing of a green car, a big sun, and a stick figure with a flashlight. "That's you. You're the fixer." Marcus took it carefully, like it was worth more than anything at Beaumont. "This is the best payment I've ever gotten," he said, and he meant it. He tucked it into his breast pocket, right over his heart. "Thank you," Naomi said, and for once there was nothing guarded in it. "Really. Any time." He jogged back to his truck. "Good luck out there tonight. You too." The old Chevy and the vintage Jaguar pulled apart in the rain, taillights fading into the storm in opposite directions, neither of them knowing that the most honest, unguarded 30 minutes either of them had spent in years had just been with the very person they were both, at that exact moment, dreading to meet. Inside Beaumont, the world was hushed and gold. Heavy velvet drapes smothered the sound of the storm outside, trading the drumming rain for the soft murmur of a live string quartet. Crystal chandeliers threw a warm glow across tables dressed in white linen, and the city's wealthiest people leaned over tiny, expensive plates and talked in low, careful voices. Marcus felt the weight of the room the instant he stepped through the door. His charcoal suit, which had looked just fine in the dim light of his hallway mirror, suddenly felt cheap and stiff against all the tailored Italian wool around him. He was very aware of the rainwater still beaded on his shoulders, the grease he hadn't fully scrubbed from under 2 fingernails, the drying handkerchief, and the crayon drawing in his breast pocket. He straightened his spine anyway. His father had raised him not to shrink for anybody, and walked up to the host's stand. "Reservation for Sinclair," he said. The maitre d', a slim man in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, let his eyes travel slowly from Marcus's damp hair to his work-worn hands. Something cool and dismissive crossed his face before he tucked it away behind a thin, professional smile. "Ah, Miss Sinclair's table. Of course. A beat too long. This way." He was led to a curved corner booth near the tall windows overlooking the rain-slicked street. Marcus slid into the plush leather, feeling like a man who'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. When the sommelier drifted over with a wine list as thick as a phone book, Marcus politely asked for a water and caught the flicker of judgment before the man glided away. He checked his cracked phone. 7:16. Part of him hoped this Naomi would just stand him up. Then he could drive home, Heat up leftover spaghetti for Isaiah, tuck him in, and forget this whole humiliating night ever happened. He touched the crayon drawing in his pocket, thought about 4 little faces cheering in the rain, and felt a little less sorry for himself. 10 minutes later, a shift moved through the room, like a change in air pressure. Conversations dipped. Even the quartet seemed to play a shade quieter. Naomi Sinclair had arrived. She'd dried her hair in the car vents and pulled herself back together, and she moved through the gold-lit room with the unmistakable presence of a woman who was used to owning every space she entered. The maitre d', who'd looked at Marcus like something tracked in on a shoe, practically fell over himself now. "Miss Sinclair, what an honor! Your guest has already arrived." But Naomi wasn't listening, because Naomi wasn't alone. Behind her, in a nervous, rain-damp little cluster, came 4 girls in their nicest dresses. A stone-faced 10-year-old holding the hands of 2 identical 7-year-olds, and a 4-year-old riding on her mother's hip with a fistful of crayons. The plan had died in the parking lot. Naomi's mother still couldn't move off the couch. The backup sitter hadn't answered, and Naomi had made an executive decision the way she made all of them, fast and without flinching. She would walk in, find this poor man her friend had set her up with, apologize for the circus, cancel dinner, and take her girls home for grilled cheese. That was the plan. One clean, graceful exit. She followed the host toward the corner booth. The man sitting there turned his head. Naomi stopped so suddenly that Nia bounced on her hip. And then, before Naomi's stunned brain could produce a single word, her daughters did the thing children do. They saw someone they knew, and they announced it to the entire restaurant at the top of their lungs. "Mommy, it's him!" Zuri shouted, pointing. "That's the man who fixed our car." "The fixer!" the twins screamed in stereo. Nia flung both arms toward the booth, crayons scattering across the pristine carpet, and delivered the line that stopped the whole gold-lit room cold. "You fixed our mom's car!" Every head at every nearby table turned. The quartet nearly lost its place, and Marcus Bishop sat frozen in a corner booth at the most expensive restaurant in the city, staring at the woman and the 4 little girls he had rescued on a flooded back road not 2 hours before. The exact people he'd been dreading all day, the ones his sister had promised he had absolutely nothing in common with. "Naomi," he said, and his stunned face slowly cracked into pure, helpless disbelief. "Marcus," Naomi breathed, her boardroom armor gone, wiped clean off her face. You're the single dad. You're my blind date." The maitre d' looked back and forth between them, thoroughly lost. "I see you're already acquainted. I'll send your server right over." He retreated, gathering the scattered crayons like a man who no longer understood the evening. "If this story has you hooked as bad as I am, do me a favor and take 1 second right now. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us down in the comments how you think this dinner is going to go, now that the truth is out. There's a lot more coming on Recorded Dad Stories, so stick around, because trust me, this night is not over." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Naomi laughed. A real, uninhibited, un-CEO laugh that turned even more heads, and set Nia down. The girls immediately scrambled into the enormous booth on either side of the man they'd already decided was theirs. "You," Naomi said, sliding in across from him, shaking her head. "You are the hard-working, salt-of-the-earth single dad Jessica tried to sell me on." A wide grin spread across Marcus's face, and every ounce of the anxiety he'd carried through that gold door simply evaporated. "And you're the sharp, classy businesswoman my sister warned me about. Though, to be fair," he leaned back, suddenly comfortable in his out-of-date suit, "she left out the part where you drive a '69 E-Type and travel with your own pit crew." "We're not a pit crew," Zuri corrected him, dead serious. "I'm the lead engineer." "You said." You are absolutely the lead engineer, Marcus agreed. My mistake. Amara leaned across the table with the fearless directness of a 7-year-old. Are you going to be our mom's boyfriend? Amara. Naomi's face went warm. We do not. That is not. Eat your bread. There isn't any bread yet, Aaliyah pointed out. Marcus laughed, the same deep, warm laugh from the roadside, and for the first time all night the room didn't feel like a place he had to survive. It felt, absurdly, like the best dinner he'd had in years, and it hadn't even started. Their server arrived and handed out menus the size of encyclopedias. Marcus opened his, and the blood drained slowly from his face. A single steak, $180. A side of green beans, $40. He had $60 in his wallet, and 4 kids across the table, who, he now understood, were going to be very hungry very soon. The 2 worlds he'd let himself forget about for 10 minutes came slamming back down on him. Naomi missed nothing. She'd built a career on reading the smallest flicker across a person's face, and she read the tightening of Marcus's jaw before he'd finished the first column of prices. She understood it completely, and she loved him a little. Right then, for how hard he was trying not to let it show. She closed her menu with a soft snap. You know what? We've had a change of plans. She smiled up at the waiter. Warm but final. The kids have had a long, scary evening, and honestly, so have the grown-ups. We won't be doing dinner here tonight. Thank you. Marcus started to protest on reflex. Naomi, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, she said gently, leaning across the table so the girls couldn't hear. I'm doing it for me. I hate this place. The portions are the size of a postage stamp. The prices are an insult. And half the people in this room spent the afternoon trying to figure out how to stab the other half. I only agreed to come because it was neutral, public ground where I wouldn't have to be anybody's easy target. She glanced at her daughters, who were building a tower out of sugar packets. Besides, my girls want French fries, not foie gras. And so, if I'm honest, do I? That, Marcus said, deeply and genuinely grateful, might be the smartest business decision I've ever seen anybody make. They were halfway out of the booth, gathering crayons and small coats, when a shadow fell across the table. Naomi, darling, what a shocking surprise to see you slumming it. Naomi's smile vanished like a light switched off. Standing beside the booth in a suit that fit like a second skin was Preston Vance, a rival board member she'd outmaneuvered in a tense meeting just that very afternoon, when she'd blocked his attempt to gut and sell off one of Daniel's oldest properties. His silver hair was perfect. His smile was a knife. 2 junior investors hovered behind him like a bad smell. Preston, Naomi said, her voice dropping 10 degrees. I'm amazed you're still upright after the day you had. It's practically a medical miracle. Preston chuckled, warm as a freezer, and turned his attention to Marcus, letting his eyes crawl over the charcoal suit with open theatrical disdain. Then to the 4 girls, then back to Marcus. And who's this? Surely not a new acquisition, Naomi. He looks a touch depreciated. Don't tell me Sinclair Holdings has opened a charity wing. A working man and a ready-made family, all in one tragic little package. How very humanitarian of you. The girls went quiet. Zuri's chin came up, but her lip trembled, just slightly. Something cold and dangerous moved behind Naomi's eyes, and her hand curled into a fist under the table. Preston, she said, very softly, you are going to walk away from this table before I... It's all right, Naomi. Marcus's voice was easy, unbothered, and it cut through the tension like a warm knife. He didn't stand up fast or puff his chest. He simply leaned back, folded his hands, and looked at Preston, the way he'd look at a car somebody had lied to him about. His eyes drifted down to the heavy gold watch on the man's wrist. Nice watch, Marcus said, conversational. Daytona. That's a beautiful machine. A beat. Shame about the second hand, though. Preston's smug smile flickered. Excuse me? It's lagging. About a quarter beat behind. Every rotation. See it right there? Marcus nodded at the watch without touching it. Means the movement's dried out inside. No oil. Happens when a man buys an expensive machine just to be seen wearing it, and never once bothers to take care of what's underneath. He let that sit. You can put a $10,000 shine on a rusted-out engine, Preston, but anybody who actually knows what he's listening to can still hear the knock. Y'all have a good evening. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Zuri, bruised pride flaring, defending the man who'd made her the lead engineer, folded her small arms and delivered the finishing blow with the pure, unbothered honesty only a 10-year-old can manage. Yeah? And your watch is broken. He fixes broken things. He wouldn't even want yours. One of the junior investors made a strangled sound and had to study the ceiling. The other developed a sudden, deep interest in his shoes. Preston's face went a violent, blotchy red. He opened his mouth, found absolutely nothing there capable of beating a mechanic and a fourth grader at the same table, and shut it again. Enjoy your charity dinner, he spat, and turned on his heel and marched away. Naomi stared at Marcus, and then at her daughter, something bright and stunned kindling in her chest. She had watched grown men in glass towers try and fail for years to knock Preston Vance off his pedestal. It had just taken a soft-spoken mechanic and a 10-year-old girl less than 30 seconds. You, she breathed, are dangerous, Marcus Bishop. I deal with overinflated things for a living, Marcus said, deadpan, sliding out of the booth. Tires, mostly, but the principle's the same. He looked around at the hushed, gold, suffocating room, and something in his face relaxed all the way. You were right, by the way. This place is terrible. Naomi reached across on pure impulse and grabbed his hand, her palm warm against his calluses. Let's get out of here. Where to? She looked at her girls. 4 tired, hungry, wide-awake faces, watching the 2 adults with undisguised interest. You've got a boy at home, right? Isaiah? Marcus blinked. I do. My sister's got him tonight. Call your sister. Tell her to bring him. Naomi's eyes were shining now. The tired CEO nowhere in sight. Because I know a place downtown that makes the best, greasiest, most spectacular late-night burger in this whole city. And tonight, I am buying dinner for everybody. Everybody? Everybody! She scooped up Naya, herded the twins, took Zuri's hand, and led the whole strange, wonderful little parade toward the door. Past the velvet drapes, past the stunned maitre d', past the empty space where Preston had been standing. I have had the worst 2 years, Marcus, and somehow this is turning into the best night I've had in all of it. I'm not going to waste it on tiny food. The rain had softened to a fine mist by the time the little convoy pulled into the gravel lot of Pearl's All Night. Marcus's dented Silverado in the lead, Daniel's British racing green Jaguar following behind, both of them a universe away from the velvet hush of Beaumont. Here the light came from a flickering neon sign that buzzed like an angry bee, and the hard fluorescent glow over cracked red vinyl booths. The air was thick and holy, with the smell of frying onions, seasoned beef, smothered chicken, and strong black coffee. Naomi stepped out of the Jaguar in her $3,000 dress and didn't flinch at the gravel or the grease in the air. She breathed it in like a woman coming up for oxygen, and a look of pure relief settled over her face. Marcus's sister Renee arrived a few minutes later with Isaiah, took one look at the 4 little girls and the elegant woman standing beside her brother in a puddle-splashed designer gown, and mouthed, "The blind date?" at Marcus over their heads. He just shrugged, helpless and grinning. And she shook her head, and laughed, and left them to it. 7-year-old Isaiah, gap-toothed and shy, hung close to his father's leg, until Zuri walked straight up to him, with all the authority of a lead engineer, and stuck out her hand. "I'm Zuri. I'm 10. Your dad fixed our car in the rain, and I held the flashlight. Do you know about engines?" Isaiah's shyness fell off in a single second. "I know a lot about engines," he said, deadly serious. "I helped my dad rebuild a whole carburetor. I built the rocket ship on our shelf too, and it has real thrusters." "I love rocket ships," breathed one of the twins. And that was it. By the time they crowded into the big corner booth, 5 children on one side in a tangle of elbows and crayons and rescued sugar packets, 2 adults on the other, the kids were already an us. Isaiah, who was usually so quiet, was holding court about spaceship engineering to 4 rapt girls, and Nia had appointed him her personal seatmate. Behind the counter, a broad man with a gray beard and a flour-dusted apron looked up from the grill. "Marcus Bishop, ain't seen you in a month of Sundays." He counted the booth with his eyes. "And you brought the whole neighborhood." "Hey, Pearl's cousin," Marcus called back. "It's a long story, Ray. We're gonna need burgers, a lot of burgers, and double the bacon on everything." When the food came, massive glistening burgers, a mountain of golden fries, milkshakes for 5 kids who could not believe their luck, Naomi picked up her burger with both hands, took a huge, undignified bite, and closed her eyes. "Oh my God," she mumbled around it, reaching for a napkin. "That is the best thing I have eaten in 2 years. Beaumont could never." Marcus watched her shed the last of the armor he'd seen her wearing in that gold room. Under the harsh diner light, hair still a little wild from the storm, a smudge of ketchup near her thumb, 4 kids and his own son laughing in a heap beside her. She was, he thought, the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The untouchable CEO was gone. What was left was a fiercely smart, deeply tired, surprisingly funny woman who had been carrying far too much for far too long. "So," Marcus said, stealing a fry from her basket, "you run a company, you drive a car most museums couldn't afford, and you just watched your 10-year-old take down a corporate shark without breaking a sweat. Who is Naomi Sinclair?" Naomi wiped her mouth and glanced at her girls, who were now teaching Isaiah how to make a milkshake volcano. Her expression turned thoughtful, then soft, then honest. "She's a woman who spends about 90% of her time playing chess against people she can't stand," she said quietly. "Daniel built the company. It was his dream, his fire. I was the one who was good at the knives, the negotiating, the walls, the never blinking. So when he got sick, and then when he was gone, everyone just handed me the whole thing. And I kept it running, because that's what he would have wanted, and because those 4 girls needed to see me stand up." She looked down at her hands. "But lately, the walls just feel like a cell. Everything is a transaction. Everybody wants something. I forgot what it felt like to sit somewhere and have nobody want anything from me." She looked up, and her eyes were wet and unguarded. "Until a man in a wetsuit fixed my dead husband's car in the rain and asked my daughter to hold the flashlight." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? When you told me that car was his, I almost couldn't finish the job. Not because it was hard, because I understood exactly what I was holding." He turned his water glass slowly on the formica. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Same thing. Fast, cruel, expensive. Isaiah was 5, and I know that thing where the whole world piles onto your back and just expects you to keep the engine running because everybody's depending on it, and you can't ever stop, because if you stop, it all falls apart." "Yes," Naomi whispered. "That, exactly that." "So maybe," Marcus said, a tired half-smile touching his mouth, "we're both just out here, trying to keep engines running, that keep threatening to overheat. Naomi let out a breath that was half laugh, half something that ached. That is the truest thing anyone has said about my life in 2 years. Why keep the shop, though? She asked after a while. Renee mentioned the bank. You could take a job at a dealership tomorrow, walk in with your hands and your reputation, and never worry about money again. Why fight a losing battle for one little garage? Because of what's inside it, Marcus said, without hesitation. My dad built Bishop & Son with his own 2 hands. Named it for the son he hadn't even had yet. That's how sure he was. He taught me that when something's broken, you don't throw it out. You get down under it. You find the one small part that's hurting. And you do the work to bring it back to life. There's a soul in those old machines, Naomi. Somebody loved every one of them once. He glanced at his boy across the table. I want Isaiah to grow up knowing that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked against you. Especially then. Naomi reached across the chipped table and let her fingers rest against his. A little jolt went through both of them. Your father, she said softly, would be very proud of the man holding down that shop. They stayed at Pearl's for hours, drinking terrible drip coffee, watching 5 kids slowly wilt into a sleepy pile, talking about their childhoods and their failures and the quiet dreams they never said out loud. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus didn't feel the bank breathing down his neck. And for the first time in 2 years, Naomi didn't feel the whole weight of Sinclair Holdings sitting on her chest. They were just 2 exhausted people who had, against every possible odd, found a warm booth and each other on the worst-turned-best night of both their lives. When Marcus finally walked her and the girls to the Jaguar, the sky was going that bruised purple and gold color that only comes right before dawn. He buckled a half-asleep Nia into her seat. She caught his sleeve. "Are you gonna fix more of our stuff?" she mumbled. "I sure hope so. Little bit," he whispered. And as Naomi settled Zuri into the back, the girl grabbed a fistful of Marcus's jacket, pulled him down, and whispered fiercely in his ear so her mother couldn't hear. "Come back, okay? She's happy. She's never happy. Come back." Marcus's throat went tight. "I'll do my best, boss," he whispered back. "Lead engineer's orders." He stood in the empty lot and watched the green Jaguar carry all 5 of them off into the sunrise. And he touched the crayon drawing still folded in his breast pocket, and he let himself hope. Just a little. Just enough to be dangerous. 3 days later, reality came back down like a dropped engine block. Marcus stood in the dim bay of Bishop & Son, staring at a final notice of foreclosure, the bank's cold black letters swimming in front of his tired eyes. 2 weeks, $40,000, or he'd lose the shop, his father's legacy, and the roof over his son's head. His hands, freshly slicked with motor oil, trembled just slightly as he set the paper down on the workbench. Isaiah sat on a stool nearby, humming, snapping together a Lego rover, blissfully unaware that his whole world was 2 weeks from disappearing. Marcus rubbed his burning eyes. He hadn't heard from Naomi. 3 days of silence. He'd told himself it was for the best. Cinderella stories don't happen to a man who smells like WD-40 and owes the bank 40 grand. She was back in her glass tower, with her 4 girls and her billion-dollar company, and he was here, sinking, exactly where he'd always figured he'd be. He'd been a fool to hope. Zuri's whisper had been the kind of thing a kid says. That was all. And then, a deep, throaty, unmistakable roar rolled off the brick walls of the garage. Marcus turned, and his heart climbed straight up into his throat. Pulling into the sunlit driveway of the shop was the pristine, British racing green 1969 Jaguar E-Type. And this time the doors on both sides were flying open before it had even fully stopped, and 4 little girls came pouring out of it like the storm had never happened. "The fixer!" the twins shrieked, sprinting for the bay. Naomi stepped out last, And she wasn't in silk or in a boardroom suit. She wore well-worn jeans, a plain white tee, and a soft leather jacket, and she looked completely, impossibly at home, in the grit and oil shine of the place. She looked, Marcus thought, like she'd been walking into this garage her whole life. Zuri made a beeline for Isaiah and his Lego rover. "Those thrusters are on backwards," she informed him, already crouching down. "I'll show you." And just like that, the 5 of them were a knot on the shop floor again, like no time had passed at all. Naomi crossed the concrete, her boots ringing against the floor, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Naomi," he managed, wiping his hands on a rag, his mind a complete blank. "What are you?" She reached into a leather tote and pulled out a thick manila folder and set it down on the cluttered workbench, right on top of the bank's foreclosure notice, covering the cold black letters completely. "I have a serious problem, Mr. Bishop," she said, and there was a playful, deliberate crispness in her voice, the boardroom voice, but warmed all the way through. "Sinclair Holdings runs a corporate fleet of over 50 vehicles. On top of that, I've inherited my late husband's personal collection. 11 vintage European sports cars, all of them priceless, all of them temperamental, and all of them, currently, in the hands of a dealership that overcharges me, underdelivers, and could not tell a distributor cap from a coffee cup." Marcus stared at the folder. "Naomi, what is this?" "That," she said, tapping it, "is a 3-year exclusive contract. Fleet maintenance and full restoration services. Bishop and Son Restorations. Sole provider. It comes with a substantial signing retainer. More than enough, I'd imagine, to clear up any little misunderstandings a shop might be having with its bank." Marcus's breath caught. Pride and refusal rose in his chest before he could stop them. "Naomi, I can't take a handout. I won't. It is not a handout." She stepped closer, right into his space, and her voice dropped the performance. "I am a businesswoman, Marcus. I do not make bad investments. Ask Preston. I watched you diagnose a dead engine by ear, in a downpour, in the dark, with 4 terrified kids in the back seat, and I watched you do it, without asking for a single thing in return. You are the best I have ever seen at what you do. I need the best. This is not charity. This is me being smart." She glanced down at the folder, and then back up, and her whole face went soft and open. "And, okay. Partly it's me finding an excuse to see you again, because I figured you'd never let me buy you dinner at Beaumont, and my daughter has asked me every single day, for 3 days, when we're going back to see the fixer." A slow, brilliant smile broke across Marcus's face and chased every shadow off it. But Naomi wasn't done. She reached into the tote again and drew out a single set of keys on a worn leather fob, the keys to the E-type. She pressed them into his oil-stained hand and closed his fingers around them. "There's one more thing in that contract," she said, quieter now, just for him. "I want you to do a full, ground-up restoration on Daniel's Jaguar. Every part. Take your time. Do it right." Her eyes shone. "For 2 years I couldn't touch it, because touching it meant it was really over. But you fixed it in the rain, and you told my daughter you don't throw broken things away. You take the time to understand them, and you bring them back to life. I've been keeping that car in a garage like a tomb, Marcus. I don't want a tomb. I want it running. I want to hand it down to those girls someday. Alive, with all its history in it." She swallowed. "Help me carry it forward, instead of just carrying it." Marcus looked down at the keys in his hand, and at the woman in front of him, and at 5 kids arguing happily over a Lego rover on the floor of his father's shop, and the whole distance between their 2 worlds folded down into something small and warm and real. "You know," he said softly, stepping closer until there was almost nothing left between them, I still hate that restaurant. But I know a place with the worst coffee in the city, and the best burgers you've ever had, and I happen to know it's open all night. It's a date, Naomi whispered. It's a date, he agreed. And there, in the dusty, sunlit bay of Bishop and Son Restorations, surrounded by half-built engines and the bright racket of 5 children who had already decided they were one family, Marcus Bishop kissed Naomi Sinclair, and neither of them was dreading a single thing anymore. Nia looked up from the Lego rover, watched the 2 grown-ups for a second, and announced to the entire garage with enormous satisfaction, "See? I told you he was the fixer. And if you're still here with us, all the way to the end, then you're part of this story now. And I mean that. Go on and hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us down in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. The flashlight in the rain, Zuri's whisper, or those keys in his hand. Recorded dad stories. We'll see you in the next one." Weeks later, the E-Type sat in the center of the shop under a soft light, stripped down and rebuilt piece by loving piece, gleaming like the day it rolled off the line. And better, because now it was full of new history too. On a Saturday morning, Marcus lifted the smallest of the girls up onto the fender and let all 5 kids gather close as he pressed the freshly cut key into Zuri's hand and let her turn it. The engine woke with a deep, healthy, perfect roar, and the whole shop full of children cheered. Marcus Bishop had learned one thing for certain in his life, and this had only proved it again. The most beautiful things in this world are almost never the ones that come perfect and shining off a showroom floor. They're the ones you find stranded in the dark, in the rain, when you least expect them. They're the ones you take the time to understand. They're the ones you don't throw away. They're the ones you build back to life together. One small, broken, precious piece at a time. If this one moved you, share it with somebody who needs a reminder that the best things in life show up when you least expect them, on the worst night, in the pouring rain. And don't forget to subscribe to Recorded Dad Stories for a brand new story, just like this one, every single week.